Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Carrie. I'm the Senior Organizing Manager here at FairVote Washington, and I am delighted to welcome you to our November Roadmap to Ranked Choice Voting webinar. We're so glad to have you. First, I want to just take a moment and acknowledge the big storm a lot of us just lived through here in Washington. I hope everyone is safe and that your power is back on if it's off and that your cars didn't get damaged and all the rest, and sending thoughts your way if you did encounter some challenges with our weather. Tonight, we are going to talk about some forward motion. We obviously just had an election 3 weeks ago, and tonight we have Diane Silver from FairVote National and Jeanne Massey, the Executive Director of FairVote Minnesota, to talk to us about what happened with ranked choice voting, the good, the bad, the ugly, and our path forward, because there is a really hopeful path forward. But before I do that, I want you all to meet Elise Orlick. Elise is our newest Executive Director, and I am excited for you all to get a chance to hear from her.
Thank you so much, Carrie, and hello, everyone. I am Elise Orlick, FairVote Washington's new Executive Director as of November 4th. And if you're looking at your calendar, you might realize that that was the day before this year's elections. So there has been a ton happening ever since I started. And I'm so excited to be joining such an impactful organization at such a pivotal time. I bring a background in organizing, advocacy, and fundraising for a democracy that works for all of us. I began my career in the other Washington, working to get big money out of politics. And I moved to Seattle, this is the state that my family lives, so I was moving closer to them, and was part of the successful effort in 2018 to bring automatic voter registration and other pro-voter reforms here to Washington. I've spent the last few years raising money for civic engagement, and I'm bringing all of those skills together in this new role. Throughout my career, I have heard repeatedly from voters, donors, and supporters that they have frustrations with our current system of elections. The divisiveness and the limited options have them fed up. But many of them don't know that there's a solution for many of these problems through ranked choice voting. So one of the many, many things that I love about this great state is that Washington is always willing to lead the country with good, innovative ideas for our democracy. And that's why I think this is a crucial organization that is working to make ranked choice voting the next one of those innovations Washington adopts. I want to thank all of you for your support, your notes and suggestions in the last 2 weeks. Please continue reaching out to me and the rest of the team. FairVote Washington is a movement, and you all power that movement. I also ask that as you hear about the work we have planned for the next few months, you will consider making a gift to FairVote Washington to support all of that work. Even $10 a month can power our movement for a better democracy. And now I'll pass it back to Carrie to dive into our program.
Thanks so much, Elise. Before we get started, I'll just want to remind everyone that we have a Q&A feature. So as we go through our conversation, whatever questions you have, feel free to drop them in the Q&A and we will do our best to get to them. First, I would like to welcome Jeanne Massey. Jeanne Massey is the Executive Director of FairVote Minnesota. She is a frequent media resource on electoral reform and provides inspiration and strategy counsel to advocates from across the country. Jeanne engages diverse and cross-sector leaders in her work, including multi-partisan groups, voting rights advocates, electoral reformers, and the business community. Her track record includes winning campaigns in Minneapolis, St. Paul, St. Louis Park, and Bloomington, and Minnetonka, Minnesota, all of which have helped create statewide momentum for ranked choice voting. Welcome, Jeanne.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. And next, I would like to invite to the screen Diane Silver. Diane is FairVote's advocacy manager, and she works to expand support for national ranked choice voting legislation, as well as capacity building for state and local ranked choice voting efforts. She works with all the state ranked choice voting organizations across the country, such as FairVote Washington, to provide FairVote's core resources, communications, data, and research, legal expertise and language, drafting campaign strategy and planning to support all of our legislative and grassroots initiatives to adopt ranked choice voting. Diane is the coordinator who helps state and local groups learn from each other, build on each other's wins, not reinvent the wheel, and in short, pull us all together, pull all of our disparate efforts together to make our whole more than the sum of our parts. Welcome, Diane. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, we're delighted. As we get started, I just want to frame this conversation about overall, we're going to be talking about ranked choice voting election results statewide, locally, and everywhere in between. So Jeanne, I'm going to just jump right into it with you. You have expanded ranked choice voting to 5 cities in Minnesota and defended it several times, and most recently in Bloomington. Can you break down the importance of the offensive strategies to get ranked choice voting into cities and the defense to defend it once it's at cities?
Sure. Well, thanks, Carrie, and thanks, FairVote Washington, for convening all of this conversation and seeing where we go in Washington and across the country at this pretty pivotal moment, as you said. And I'm really excited to be a part of the conversation and share the Minnesota experience and how that can help lay the good groundwork for work in other states. So I think I'll just frame this a little bit for people who may be newer to the movement. Ranked choice voting is now at not a super mature point in the movement, but we've made so much good wins happen, and we are at a very different place than we were early in the day. So we are defending a lot less than we used to. So back in the early 1900s, many of you know that there was a whole movement around ranked choice voting and proportional ranked choice voting, but there really wasn't the infrastructure to defend it, and it didn't last. Fast forward to 2004, when San Francisco passed ranked choice voting and started this new generation of ranked choice voting, there were some early losses because there wasn't the infrastructure to defend. But now we have an infrastructure more ready to defend. So as we win, we are resourcing ourselves to be ready for potential blowback on those wins and have the ability and capacity to defend like we do the wins. And it's really critical that we actually build the budgets for defense as we build the budgets to win. Now, there are some important benefits from defense. People love to defend what they fought hard to win in the first place. And so people rally around defense in a way that's a little bit simpler sometimes than rallying around a new idea and getting support for a new idea. And in doing that, we deepen our relationships, we deepen our coalition, we broaden our coalition, we get people saying, hell no to those people who are not for an expanded democracy. And it's an easy message for people. So while we don't like defense campaigns and we don't like to have to raise money for defense campaigns, we've had to do it twice, or actually more than that. We had to defend Minneapolis in a legal setting back in 2009 after it passed. And then recently, last year in Minnetonka and this year in Bloomington, where they had pockets of foes that they thought they could actually collect enough signatures, and they succeeded, and then get it on the ballot where the population and voters were clearly against them as a majority. And we demonstrated that. It was, they're actually like fun campaigns in lots of ways. We don't like to have to raise money for it and distract ourselves in doing that work, but we do actually come out stronger and more resilient because of those defense campaigns. But for everyone like moving RCV initiatives forward, don't just think the win is one and done. There's education to do every time you implement ranked choice voting and defense to do. If there's a backlash, and that backlash can come from Democrats and Republicans, so you have to just know your community, where that backlash is coming from, and inoculate it as best as possible.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. It's such a great rallying cry to remember that the work is never done. And it's never done. We're going to keep going as long as we need to. And Diana, I'd love to hear from you more about what you're doing across the nation. You're working on bringing ranked choice voting to cities specifically. And we saw that in the election results this year, everywhere that was voting to adopt ranked choice voting, did not pass it, but every city that was voting to adopt ranked choice voting did bring it forward. So those are some exciting results, or interesting and educational at the very least. So I'd love to hear more about what you're doing with cities.
Well, thank you for that question, and thank you for having me. I'll echo what Jeanne said. It's great that you are convening kind of conversation and providing this resource to the supporters in Washington and to the whole movement. So appreciate it. I would say that the city effort is a really critical part of the movement for a number of reasons. I think we believe in both the trickle up and the trickle down portions of the strategy, and the trickle up part is the strategy of normalizing ranked choice voting as simply the best way to vote. We want voters to go to the polls having had the experience of ranking the candidates in some elections and then feel like, wait a minute, why do I get to rank my candidates for my mayoral election or my city council election, but I only get to pick one for this Senate race? What's that all about, right? And so, it's this idea that we need millions of voters to be familiar with ranked choice voting in order to demand it. And not just voters, but also candidates, campaign managers, the media, and very importantly, election administrators. We need secretaries of state and county clerks and elected officials to all be familiar with it as users, because we have found that wherever ranked choice voting is used, people like it. Once people get to do it, they like it, they understand it, they want to do it again. And so the best way is to give people experience with it. And so, so that's one reason. And then, the focus on cities, often a city race is simply an easier lift. Ranked choice voting is still a relatively new idea for a lot of voters. We all know it's not a new idea in the world. It's been in use for hundreds of years. We all have that know how long it's been used. But for many voters, it's a new idea. And so there's a lot of education that has to be done to get the support that we need. And so with limited resources, I think often just having a smaller audience to focus on, can set the stage for success. So that's probably part of it. I think also there's a big advantage in focusing on cities, because cities are one of the best opportunities for using proportional ranked choice voting, which we think is one of the best aspects of it. Proportional RCV is one of our North Stars for at the federal level, getting the Fair Representation Act for Congress, but that is a pretty heavy lift. But city councils are a really great application of proportional ranked choice voting. And so being able to use that multi-winner form of it gives, again, voters and elected officials and candidates the experience with it. And so we think that that's a really good stage setter for then being able to work for that for state legislatures and then eventually for Congress. So that's a reason why we're excited about the application in cities. And I would say also that right now in this moment, just as you said, we had a nice slew of city wins. We have now, the movement as a whole has now won, I think, 31 city ballot measures in a row, which is exciting. We had some setbacks at the state level, some shortfalls. And so I think just in this moment, because of that, maybe there's a little bit more excitement about city efforts. That doesn't mean we're giving up on state efforts at all. But I think we're kind of regrouping and evaluating and learning. So for all those reasons, we're really looking at cities as a really great opportunity in this coming year.
That is so exciting. I love.
Carrie,
Go ahead.
could I add a couple of points on this whole notion?
Please.
Because
Yeah.
I think they're important for us to consider as we advocate at a state.
Mhm.
So there have been some pros and cons to doing city by city. One, people believe that RCV fixes different problems when we go to partisan races at the state and federal level, and it indeed does, and it's where we believe it's a big tool to address the extremism that we're experiencing that doesn't necessarily always exist locally, at least according to people's perception, and for sure in the same way. So people's impatience, I think, are driving us to like, we can't wait for every single city to do this before we get RCV and state and federal elections. We'll die first. So one of those, like, we have to figure out a way to balance the normalization and the city by city strategy with opportunities for statewide. Alaska and Maine demonstrated we didn't have to go city by city, and they're very successful models, right? And so they had this magical formula when I think they had problems that they identified they wanted to solve at the state level, and they successfully translated that problem statement into a movement in their states in order to pass this. And I think we just want to remember those successes without doing city by city. Now Maine is going back and doing cities, and so is Alaska. But it wasn't a prerequisite. So I just want us to kind of think about one size doesn't always fit all. I think the other thing about city by city is because they have mostly been in large democratically controlled cities, the accusations too easily tagged against ranked choice voting as being a democratic reform. And that makes it harder then to implement in redder cities or redder states. So while there's a propensity for Democrats to like small d democratic reforms in big cities, and they are rather winnable races or elections when we run the right campaigns, it comes at the expense of that narrative that we have to mitigate then when we want to broaden out that partisan support.
I agree with you absolutely, Jeanne, and I'll reiterate that we believe in both the trickle up and the trickle down strategy. I sometimes talk to people with strategy, kind of come at the problem from both sides. And I think also, you know, at FairVote, we recognize the value of ranked choice voting in primary elections, and I think that that's a really promising on ramp, especially for trying to win over party leaders who have been election, and and then you're addressing a different problem, and we have a good narrative of how ranked choice voting sets up the winner of that primary election to be a strong candidate going into the general election with more united support from those party voters, because the psychology changes. If you didn't get your first choice, you probably got your second or your third choice. So all of those reasons. So I agree with you. We need to be working on this from many angles.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. And I think your quote about it's going to take, millions of people demanding it to bring it will stick with me. And Jeanne, absolutely. It doesn't have to go slowly. It can go quickly, but it is state by state, as we know. And speaking of statewide, ranked choice voting reform ballot, ballot initiatives working to add ranked choice voting to states failed in every state. We're obviously still waiting on Alaska's results. I'm not really including that in this discussion because it was a repeal campaign and not an adding campaign. But do we have a sense of why? And obviously it wasn't just ranked choice voting that didn't pass. It was every type of electoral reform didn't move through. And I'd love to hear from you both about if we can speculate as to why and what lessons we can take away from that.
Diane, go ahead and start us out. I've got a few observations and I'd love to add to your thoughts.
Sure. Yeah. I think that first of all, I want to be careful about generalizing, because I think each one really was a different campaign, and we want to be careful not to just lump them all together. But there are some observations that I think are applicable across the board. One is, as you noted, Carrie, it wasn't just ranked choice voting, but all of the pro-democracy measures that were on the ballot at the state level this year fell short. That included anti-gerrymandering measures. There were some top two measures that were simply, we should have majority winners, that weren't necessarily advocating for ranked choice voting as the mechanism, but just trying to set the stage that there should be majority rule. And those also fell short. So, there was a dynamic in this particular election, that I think created we have a very hyper-partisan environment that we have had for the last 10 years anyway, but it was very strong and influential. We've been feeling like the presidential race really sucked up a lot of oxygen in this cycle. It was hard to get the message out. It was hard to get the media attention that we needed. There was a lot of opposition. I think that there's clearly so much more opposition today than there was 5 years ago. When the main ballot measure was initially underway, and then when Alaska was being voted on, even at those times there wasn't as tough opposition out there, and it's a lot easier to put out those opposition talking points. They're short and succinct, and they're designed to just create fear mongering, but responding to them takes more space. And when there isn't that space, because the presidential race is just dominating everything, it was just a real challenge to get the truth out there enough. So I think that was part of it. What we have found is, as I said before, voters who have used ranked choice voting like it, and we saw that reflected in this election. In Oregon, the counties that already have some experience with ranked choice voting supported the ballot measure. When we crunched the numbers county by county, there was far more support where they've already used it. And we saw that Alaska obviously is the closest of all these state ballot measures. We're still, fingers crossed, we don't know the final result, but certainly hoping we're going to squeak through. But even if we fall short there, just the closeness of that one demonstrates that where people have experience with it, there's far more support. So, I think that's a little bit of just consolation philosophy. But there were all those factors at play. I think that the campaigns in each of those states ran good campaigns. They ran smart campaigns. It's hard to do coulda, shoulda, woulda. We're trying to take learning moments, from it, however much we can. But sometimes the deck is just stacked against you. So those are some thoughts. I'd love to hear what you have to add, Jeanne.
I agree with all of that. It was a very tough year for reform measures. The noise at the top of the ticket and people believing that they needed change, and they found it in a presidential candidate as opposed to reform. It just, that resonated. The noise was that much louder than anything we could do to counter that. That said, I think a couple of observations. It was, I think, when the initiatives began and thought, oh, it'll be great to put this on a presidential year. High turnout's usually good for pro-democracy ballot measures. They are. We always use that as a formula. That wasn't true this year. And so it wasn't a miscalculation. It was an unknown calculation to realize, oh, here we are with headwinds that we did not actually foresee, right? And the fact that there was a change at the top of the ticket. So it was a challenging year all around. And I think that is top line, something that we just need to dig into. I'm eager to see the numbers of who voted for the ballot measures and who they voted for top of ticket and down ballot. Like, those will be informative pieces of information for us as we move ahead with statewide ballot measures. That said, I think there was a level of preparedness that probably wasn't fully there for the ballot measures as they moved forward, because we know there was just some really strong partisan opposition on both sides of the aisle in some of these ballot measures. And that means there wasn't a readiness to inoculate that, even if we didn't have those headwinds. So I think we just need to dig deeper in terms of how we're looking at some of these and make sure that we understand what it takes to be prepared for now real opposition. Diane, I could not agree more. When Maine started and even Alaska, the opposition wasn't ready to oppose. That has changed. Ranked choice voting is now banned in 10 GOP-controlled states. It passed as a ban on the ballot in Missouri. They're organized. They have talking points. Local groups don't have to do much work. They're all given all their talking points on the right from the Heritage Foundation. From the Democrats, it's a different ball of wax there in different, I think, in different states. But on the GOP side, it certainly is a coordinated effort, top down, and the marching orders are super clear. That did not exist a few years ago. That's what we were dealing with in Minnetonka and Bloomington at a local level. Same groups of people, same message line, and it's strong and it's resonating with people. So we just need to now have a different measure for how prepared we feel to actually run these statewide ballot measures. I don't think a year ago when they were getting on the ballot, they foresaw all of this. It's gained that kind of strength since the time they got initiated. So I'm not casting aspersion. I just think it as a learning moment, we now have to know what it means to be ready for these kinds of measures and do the groundwork to inoculate that opposition. So that said, it's probably going to be a bit harder moving forward before we feel like we have that level of readiness. Diane, I think I agree with you too. Like this is state by state. Every state has a different problem to be solved. Not every state is going to be different. It's not a one size fits all. So the fact that all of these ballot measures were actually a combination of 2 reforms, not once, top 4, top 5, and ranked choice voting, 2 reforms at once can often make it challenging to be persuasive on what problems you're trying to solve and really bring that package all together. So I think another analysis we'll be doing is one better than other? Is the combination better? What's it going to be? And I'm looking forward to the analysis from each of the states on what their takeaways are once we know what the exit polling looks like, once we know what other information they have as learning moments for all of us. So that's really key. And I think in Oregon in particular, I'm just eager to hear what the campaign has to say. I haven't really gotten the take on that. They had a successful measure to pass it legislatively, to refer it to the ballot. So they had that organic support. And yet the bigger forces were overwhelming to that campaign. And I'm just eager to see what we can learn from all of that. And I don't think we know that yet. So I would say, bottom line, I wouldn't use this year and the defeat of those ballot measures in 4 states as a reason to give up on state work. I know a kind of a bigger analysis is we know it's popular at the city level. We can get these ballot measures passed, but I wouldn't want that to stop us from looking at where it can work in states. Truly, there are states that may be more ready, and I don't want the national narrative to be, oh, it can work at a local level and not the state.
Right.
And we don't want that to ever become a talking point for opponents or proponents.
Right. I agree with you completely, Jeanne. And I think you're spot on in recognizing that the definition of readiness has changed.
It's changed.
And so I just really double down on what you said of absolutely state efforts can still be viable. And we have to make sure that we're ready as we embrace, and the definition of what that means is now different.
Thank you both so much. I am going to start moving into some of our audience questions, and then I might switch back to some of our pre-written questions. But Jeanne, a couple of times you've talked about inoculating, and we have a question from Mary Holland who's wondering how you inoculate somebody, and I'm going to expand on that to say, who do you inoculate? And is it voters? Is it legislators? All the above? Do you start inoculating before the campaign once it's happening? I'd love to hear more about that.
Thanks for that question. For sure, inoculation happens in the planning phase of all of this. It's not usually the voter. You're inoculating against opposition voices, leaders, groups who can be stronger than your message line. So if you know there's a group that will be opposing you, who are the messengers primarily who can inoculate against that people would prefer to listen to over them? And that inoculation circle of leaders just needs to be bigger than the voices of opposition. And that happens during the planning phase. And I would argue that you want to evaluate that strongly enough where if you don't believe you have an inoculation strategy that's going to outweigh the opposition voices, you just don't do it. Why run into you just don't want to do it. You have to believe that your analysis is going to prevail with a win. So to make a long story short, a very simple strategy that we've deployed in every ballot measure, whether it's been to win or defend, is to do a green, yellow, and red light strategy. At every turn, evaluate the conversation. Come back after every coffee meeting, every event. Does that give us a green light, a pause light, or did that signal a warning sign for us? And then just evaluate that trajectory of conversations over time as you're building to actually placing a question on the ballot or asking a city council to pass it outright or whatever your strategy is. Evaluate at every juncture. Don't get too excited and hopeful that puts blinders on you about the real prospects of winning. There's nothing worse than a loss because you weren't paying attention to where that opposition is from. And if it's stronger than you are, you got more work to do.
I would build on that also, Jeanne, in thinking about, in particular, some critical who people. One is we've recognized, I think we've had some learning from this cycle that election administrators are an audience who we really need to attend to at pre-phase, that sitting down, especially, and again, I'm kind of coming at this from the city level because that's the level that I work on most predominantly, that as we're looking at readiness, talking to the county clerk or registrar, whatever their title is, and any other staff, and really listening, like not just being advocates, but recognizing that their job is super hard, conveying to them that we recognize that their job is super hard. And, this is a reform that we think is super valuable. And we recognize that it will be a lift for them to make this transition. We think that in the long run, it's not any harder. And we've seen over a good 20 years in the Bay Area, administering ranked choice voting elections, can become normalized for them the same way it can for the voters. But the transition is extra work for them. And I think just acknowledging that can be beneficial, and really listening to their concerns and working to address those concerns ahead of time can help at least neutralize any opposition. I don't think they're ever going to be advocates for it. They're not supposed to be advocates for issues, but we found opposition this year from that audience. So that's one. I think another one, especially at the local level, is thinking about the local media and identifying, who are the primary media outlets in your region, and who are the individuals, like who has the politics beat for the local paper, for the local radio station, for whatever, and trying to form some relationships with them and helping educate them about ranked choice voting, because there's this story that's going to be coming up once you launch that campaign. It's going to be out there. They're going to be covering it, helping form that relationship to say, if when you hear talking points from others about this, or just if you have any questions, I hope you'll view us as your go-to resource on this issue. We're the the state ranked choice voting organization, so that kind of thing can help at least bring them to you before they publish some negative story without giving you the chance to rebut what those arguments are. That can help a lot. So that's just two thoughts on sort of preparation. I'm sure there's others as well. Also,
Sure.
I guess
Mhm.
I'll add one more, which is the leaders of your niche communities. You know, whoever the micro communities are, the various constituencies in that jurisdiction. You want to be sure to get, you know, the different neighborhoods. They have trusted messengers. They have leaders in those communities. Getting with those people ahead of time, explaining it, and helping them understand how ranked choice voting will benefit their people. This will help your community, your neighborhood, the issues that you care about.
Mhm. So, Carrie, if I could operationalize two examples, both on admin and media. So in Minneapolis, way back in the day now, there was huge opposition from administration. The last messenger on the planet to ever gain her trust was me. Like, go away. There's just no way. So how did we inoculate her obstruction? The city council wanted this. We made her their problem, not our problem.
Mhm.
They had to manage and make sure she was going to have to do the work of implementing what policy they wanted passed. And when it came down to it, the mayor at the time said, there's no way we are going to tell the world we cannot implement ranked choice voting. We are going to get this done. We're going to get it done this year. She quit rather than do that. And in the wake of that came the most amazing administrator who said, on contract, he came back out of retirement.
Oh my gosh.
I was so excited to be a part of this experiment in the city of Minneapolis. You just make sure that the messengers are right. You have an inoculation plan. I was never, ever going to be persuasive with her, nor anyone related to the push for the movement. So just one example of how you just take whoever your opposition is, create an inoculation plan, basically. And then on the media side, so I appreciate what you said, Diane, because the media is crucial. Most people get their information from mass media. Now, that was back in the day. Now it's social media and influencers. So that's changing. And I think we need to adapt our strategies as the new information world changes. And we're at the cusp of those changes. But generally, until now, media has played such an oversized role in how people get their information on things like ranked choice voting. So what we did was literally come up with a reason during these implementation cycles of emailing something to the press every single week. So it was no question who they would call if they had a question. So we sent out a series of expectation memos on something simple, just single subject lines, just making sure that if they had a question on ranked choice voting, they were going to call Jeanne Massey or whoever it was. So that's how you would operationalize that kind of idea. It's not just in the generic, they're very practical tools you can use to implement that kind of thing.
That makes a lot of sense. I appreciate it. So get out in front of it. We have a couple questions from folks who are wondering about the opposition. We're talking obviously a lot about inoculating against it, but who are they? We have a question from Maya Morales, who is a recently elected charter review commissioner up in Whatcom County. And she's wondering if you're seeing any new positioning for or against ranked choice voting emerge from conservative or libertarian voters. But just in general, we also know that a lot of opposition comes from the left as well. So who do you see it from and how do you respond to it? We can start with Diane.
Sure. Yeah. I think I would say for starters that opposition is coming from both of the major parties, both the Democrats and the Republicans. And I think it's for different reasons. The Republican opposition really ramped up after the Alaska election when Mary Peltola, a Democrat, won that congressional seat, which forever had been perceived as a safe Republican seat. And I think that it's a really interesting narrative. Not that it's partisan, but what it shows is ranked choice voting did exactly what it is supposed to do, which is it revealed the true will of the voters. And it revealed a misperception that had been in existence for a very long time, which is that Alaska is a conservative state and it has always leaned right, but there was a presumption that that meant that it was a Republican state. And that does not necessarily go hand in hand, because Alaska is also a very independent-minded state. 60% of voters in Alaska are registered independent. So they're not loyal to either party, but they do lean conservative in their policies. And so forever that right lean had resulted in a Republican winner. But in this election with ranked choice voting, the dynamics changed. The Democrat ran a very smart ranked choice voting campaign, focusing on issues, staying positive. She's a very moderate Democrat, so she wasn't a far lefty. I mean, all these different factors combined so that she ended up winning. Well, that loss for the Republicans really stung, and they scapegoated ranked choice voting as the reason for that loss. And I think that it led to just a serious doubling down of ranked choice voting must be a leftist ploy for Democrats to take over, and we have to nip it in the bud. And it became a plank in their national strategy, and they started putting out model legislation and talking points, and it actually became a signaling mechanism for up and coming candidates to demonstrate their loyalty to the party, and up and coming elected officials to demonstrate that loyalty. So there's a whole psychology going on in the Republican Party. And then for the Democrats, they're also coming out opposed now, but I think it's a different animal and different motivation. From what I've heard so far, I feel like the pushback is more about the party integrity and the open primaries component. And I'm not dissing the open primaries. I'm not saying that we don't support it or anything. I'm trying to kind of think about what I have heard from some Democratic leaders so far is that was the piece they were more concerned about. But I don't know if that's true across the board. And so, like, I want to be very clear on that. I don't think that that's a generalization, but I think that their motivation is different. We've also seen mixed support from certain demographic groups. Like in some states, the NAACP is an ally and is very supportive, and in other states, they're not. And there's been narrative out there that somehow this is going to hurt Black voters or whatever, and so we have to fight against that. It goes back to the inoculation piece that Jeanne was talking about, and what I was thinking is you have to really know who those demographic groups are in your community and find who those trusted leaders are and talk with them behind the scenes ahead of time to try to help them understand how this will help their community. So that's kind of some starting thoughts about where opposition is coming from.
Yeah, thank you so much. Jeanne, I'd love to hear from you.
We experienced that same kind of general opposition from Republican camps here in Minnesota. Again, they can easily use the argument that this started in big Democratic cities, and so Dems like it, and so therefore it's not for Republicans, without giving it any analysis whatsoever. So then we have to make sure that we are having the conversations in very geographically diverse areas. We know through our ballot measures in suburban communities, there are many Republicans who like ranked choice voting and vote for ranked choice voting and independence. So it's not a question of voters always, as much as it is about leadership and messaging against it, to Diane's point. So one of the tactics that we are deploying is to go out county by county in greater Minnesota and getting resolutions of support from counties. Counties are important because counties elections in Minnesota have 2-round elections. They're nonpartisan, so they have a primary in August and a general election in November. No one literally comes out for that election in August, but they have to spend the money. And no matter your political stripe, existing county commissioners and administrators and voters get the illogic of those elections. And it's a good starting point to neutralize the partisan conversations around this and just talk about the logic of having a single election with a majority winner mechanism that everyone can rally around. So it's one of our strategies to try to move away from the partisan conversation that is encircling ranked choice voting. And that said, like legislatively, because the narrative has come down from the national party, we have to react to efforts to ban ranked choice voting each legislative cycle.
Wow.
Mhm.
Keeping us busy.
Yep.
Well, that said, I want to run into our last question. We have a couple more things to get through in this meeting, but I would love to hear from you both why it's worth fighting for ranked choice voting. Clearly, it's a long fight. It's a never-ending fight, but it's a worthwhile fight, and I would love to hear from you both. I'll give you a minute each. Diane, go ahead.
You want me to start? Sure.
Sure.
I would say that, first of all, ranked choice voting gets to the root of the problem. You know, there are some people are so frustrated with our politics. I think there's a very salient feeling right now of so many voters who were not happy with their 2 choices this year at the highest level. And there's just a frustration of why are these my only choices? Why can't I have more choices? Why can't I have different choices? And ranked choice voting is the reform that gives people more choice. And I think that's what people want. I would also say that we have to recognize that ranked choice voting alone is not a silver bullet. It's not going to solve every single political problem that we have, but it can be the catalyst for other reforms to also have viability. You know, we have to change. We're talking about changing policy. We're talking about changing the way things are done. And it's hard to get the people who are in office and who have been elected under the current system to then agree to change that system. And that is true for all these different reforms that people are working for. And so I think that ranked choice voting is a good start for paving the way for many of them. One reason is, as we like to say at FairVote, it is the fastest growing reform in the country. And we have good momentum behind it. And so I think for that reason, it's worth doubling down and investing in this movement and in this reform to keep it going. I would say, you know, it empowers voters. It changes the focus from candidates and politicians and parties and operatives to the voters. It puts the voter central. And that's what voters want and what voters deserve. It rewards candidates who can deliver for the majority of their constituents, not just a narrow base. You know, I think that our talking points are really strong for all the benefits of ranked choice voting. I think that when you go through them, people nod their heads and say, yeah, that sounds good. And I think that people are frustrated right now and want to do something.
Yeah.
And I think that ranked choice voting really is a viable solution. And we provide those frustrated voters something really concrete that they can do. Join this movement, invest your time and your resources with your state organization, join the Speakers Bureau, join the Footboard Brigade, all the different volunteer opportunities that are out there. it is really meaningful work. And we are building momentum in spite of the state losses this cycle. I will say it again, we have had 31 city wins in a row. And in spite of these state losses, as Jeanne has said, there are still really good viability and opportunities for state measures. This is the path forward.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
That might have been more than a minute.
There's a lot of good about ranked choice voting. We appreciate it.
I just echo
Jeanne.
everything you have said, Diane. I want to highlight for all the listeners that there was a huge successful outcome in Maine once more. We're waiting to see what happens in the Alaska election for Congress, but in the Maine second congressional district, we had ranked choice voting be the decisive mechanism for deciding the outcome in that very competitive race, and incumbent Jared Golden won that race. These are examples why ranked choice voting is so critical. So I'm hopeful, and Carrie, it's your generation and everyone younger than you that inspires me every day to stay at this big, powerful structural reform. I couldn't agree more with Diane. There's no panacea here, but it's probably the single biggest thing we can do that's achievable and impactful, that can change the trajectory of our democracy for the long term. I got involved 18 years ago following Gore v. Bush. It was my wake-up call moment. There are many more wake-up call moments for every generation of voters. Of course, 2024 is another huge wake-up moment for all of us. And little did I know when I started just how bad it would all get without stronger structures to guard against the extremism and the authoritarian attacks on our democracy. And I often have said, I fear we won't get RCV instituted quickly and broadly enough to prevent the worst from happening. Well, here we are. That's no reason to despair and give up. Not at all. We have to prevail because this is still achievable and impactful. When we're seeing the failure of our system now in the most fearful way possible, this is the time to roll up our sleeves and not lose faith. I said this before, I don't think the setbacks at the state level will roll back 2 decades of progressive wins around ranked choice voting, and the enthusiasm remains, and people believe in the power of this and doability of this reform. So my bottom line message is, and my hope is, that don't despair and give up, as appealing as it may seem in these really rough moments in the aftermath of a super tough election. We must remain hopeful, united, strategic, funded, and confident in our path forward. So yes, it is still worth the fight for me 18 years later.
And don't I have some good news for us at the end of our conversation together? The repeal in Alaska, it has failed by 664 votes.
My gosh, you guys,
So,
the best news.
so I mean, I don't know if that'll trigger a recount or anything, but right now we are solidly winning. There's 1% left to count. So to circle back to our very first question, why is it worth defending? This is why. We are voters want this to stay. So thank you both so much for sharing your time and your knowledge and your wisdom with us. We at FairVote Washington have a long path. It's not a long path. We have a path ahead of us still to bring ranked choice voting to our state more broadly. As you all know, we have our upcoming lobby day. We're going to be championing our Washington Voices Act again, which will establish pathways for municipalities to bring ranked choice voting to their local cities, and it establishes statewide standards so that it's done cohesively and without a lot of chaos and a lot of support to the auditors, as you're discussing, Diane. So we're really excited about that. And I think this will give us some good motivation to move forward, knowing that that this is a winning tool. Thank you both so much. I'm going to bring on my organizer, Natalie, in just a moment, but can't thank you enough, and so pleased to be able to share such good news with all of you tonight.
Yeah, thanks.
Absolutely. All right, and I would love to introduce you all to Natalie. I think some of you have gotten to meet her before, but Natalie is our organizer here at FairVote Washington and working hard to rev us up for Lobby Day. So Natalie, I'll give it to you for a moment.
Wow, what a great intro, talking about me and how great I am, but also amazing about Alaska. My video, of course, is off and everything, but I was here that's really exciting. So yeah, after this election, with all these different results that have come out, I have been asked a lot lately, what can I do to help? Like, people are motivated, they want to do something. And I know, folks in here, that's why you're here. That's why you took the time for this webinar. So I want you to get your calendars out, mark down Wednesday, February 5th. That's when FairVote Washington and all of our supporters will be in Olympia for our lobby day. It's a great time is had by all. There's going to be a link in the chat, so you can do that. You can bring it up right now. You get to talk to your legislator about the benefits of ranked choice voting. You get to show the entire state legislature how much support there really is. Our goal is to have 3/4 of the legislative districts represented there. And I know last time I looked here, that's only 37 LDs. There was almost twice as many people in this webinar alone. And I think we all know somebody, that would love to come and join us. So Lobby Day is a great way to literally show up for ranked choice voting. And phone banking is the only way to get people to show up for Lobby Day. So please, join us on Wednesdays, 4 to 5:30. We do a virtual phone bank. Get to call other FairVote Washington supporters, not cold calling people who are going to say, heck yes, I love ranked choice voting. What can I do? You can say, come to Lobby Day. If that time doesn't work for you, we can definitely make something work. If you want to help, I want to help make that happen. So I think Carrie's going to drop my email, or someone is maybe in the chat. So a lot of ways to get involved, and we all know here, I'm a proud Washingtonian, born and raised. This is truly a place where we can really lead the fight for a better democracy, and it really starts by showing up. So thank you for being here and showing up tonight. And, I'm going to go out on a limb and say, Diane and Jeanne both agree that volunteering is what makes a difference, in these campaigns. These kinds of things are won when, we're part of that millions of people demanding ranked choice voting. So we can do this together, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Natalie. I'm going to now pass it back to Elise to close us out.
Well, I am still over the moon with that news. I promise we did not pick this time based on, we had no idea if there would even be a result today. It was the last day that ballots, I think, are allowed to still come in Alaska. So it's just incredible news. And it's a reminder of what Jeanne said earlier, that this is not a question of local campaigns or statewide ones. We are taking away the lesson this year that local politics have a lot of potential, but it's potential that we're going to use to build towards a statewide victory. So as Carrie mentioned, we are going to be championing the Voices Act again this year to set a clear set of standards for local, for cities and counties in Washington to be able to implement RCV. And we will get even more into that in our next roadmap. So thank you all again for joining us tonight. I will just say one more time, we have a ton of work coming up, organizing a lobby day, having our staff in Olympia pounding the pavement and pounding on doors to legislators' offices to showcase your support for ranked choice voting and the Voices Act. And a great way to support that work is not only to phone bank and to come to Lobby Day, but also to consider making a gift to FairVote Washington. If you're able to give even $10 a month, it goes a really long way year round to support our work. Thank you all for coming tonight. It's been great to have this conversation. I know I'm feeling pumped up, not only from the Alaska news, but from the really actionable advice we had from our two speakers. And thank you to Carrie for organizing this conversation as always. We will see you all next week and then on February 5th.
Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your night.